Mm-hmm. And welcome to the NX7062 podcast live here. It is Monday night in slightly.
Welcome to the NX7062 podcast
all right.
live here. It is Monday.
There we go. All right. I knew I needed to fix something. All right. We're still getting used to this simulcasting thing, still getting used to doing the whole live on two platforms. And just so everybody knows, because I'm going live on two platforms, I apologize if I miss chats on one platform because I'm kind of splitting my attention. But you know what? You guys are with me. We're here going to figure this whole thing out together. Hi, Podcat. Well, you, me, and the cat. Hi. And it is time. It is a chilly evening here in New Jersey. Thank you, as always, for joining me during the NX7062 podcast. I am your host, Stephanie K. And don't forget that you can follow me during the week on Twitter and Facebook. Would love to hear from you guys, especially since I'm always looking for new ideas for the show. And before we get going with tonight's topic, just want to let everybody know, in case you haven't heard, Creation is doing a bunch of virtual conventions, and I don't know what that means for STLV. As it stands, the last time I checked earlier today, STLV was still happening. There was 80 some odd days to go until Star Trek Las Vegas. And as we all know, I am still holding out faint hope that somehow it will still happen. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Las Vegas opening up. Hotels and casinos are supposed to be opening the end of the month. They're actually going to be opening for Memorial Day. That's the word I was looking for. They're supposed to be opening for Memorial Day weekend, but they're going to be holding convention stuff down to sorry about that. That was Pod Dog. Anakin got a little crawled up in the wires. Okay. They're going to be holding convention sizes down to 250 people. So I'm not sure if that restriction is going to be lifted in time for an August convention or not. Right now, it's 85 days to STLV. It's still active on Creation's website. So everybody cross their fingers and toes, because you know I am. But in the interim, they are having these virtual conventions where you can go and do Q&As. I attended the Q&A with Chase Masterson this past Saturday, and there happens to be one with Connor Trunier and Dominic Keating this Saturday. If you go to Stage It, you can look it up, or you can go to Creation's website and look it up. And there are still tickets available. It's pay what you want. So I paid $1. But you can also tip the performers. You know, just go investigate it. If you're a fan of Enterprise, like yours truly, and you want to go catch a virtual virtual Q&A with Connor and Dominic, that's this Saturday. Maybe there'll be some more. I don't know. Just have to, join Creation's email list and find out. Robert is joining me on Spreaker. I see you over there. Hi, Robert. Thank you as always for joining. As I mentioned right before you got here, if I don't answer your chats right away, I apologize. I'm flipping back and forth between streaming and Spreakering. So I've got two chat windows open, so you'll forgive me. But tonight's topic, now that I've mentioned Connor and Dominic, I'm happy to move into tonight's topic, which is the Kelvin timeline. Dun, dun, dun. We are talking Kelvin timeline, the JJ Abrams version of Star Trek. Now, a lot of people feel like it ruined the franchise. My personal feeling is that it helped the franchise because it sort of brought it back into mainstream. 2009, Enterprise had been off the air for 4 years. There really wasn't too much going on. The last TNG movie was 2002. So, Star Trek had been kind of quiet. And along comes JJ Abrams, and he decides that they're going to do a reboot. They're going to do a retelling. And for me, one of the things that I liked about it, one of the things that I thought was a good idea about it actually was the fact that it did it very well. This is how I look at it. It probably did for a lot of people what the reboot of Doctor Who did for me. I've mentioned this on the show a few times. I was not a Doctor Who fan when Doctor Who first started. Or I should say the first time I saw Doctor Who, which was a Tom Baker episode on PBS when I was a kid. And I couldn't get into the story because I couldn't get past the bad production value. So the story never captured my attention because I was like, the pepper pots and, robots and tinfoil and stuff just didn't do it for me. So I never watched Doctor Who. And then a friend of mine in 2005 said, or 2006 said, you really need to rewatch it. They revamped it. It's back. And obviously it's got modern production. And I did. And I rewatched it. And Star Trek and Doctor Who both over 50 years worth of story, and they've kept pretty much to that line. They've never, they've kept their canons going for, 50 odd years. So when I watched it and I saw David Tennant and then went back and rewatched Christopher Eccleston, and I fell in love with it, and he started talking about this about the Daleks or that about the Cybermen or whatever, it really made me want to go back and start watching the old episodes. And now I was engrossed in the story because now it's the history of something that I really had fallen in love with. So the fact that, and yes, the argument can be made that Kelvin did rewrite the history, but it's still about the same people. It's still about those relationships enough that I think that if you're new to the franchise and you liked the Kelvin timeline, then maybe it would spurn some people to go back and watch TOS or watch TNG. So I think from that kind of standpoint, I think that it was a really good idea. I think that it was really important that they do something like this. So that's my whole feeling on why I think the Kelvin timeline and the movies in and of itself was a really good idea. And I did watch all three of them, all three movies. If you're following me on social media, I actually sat down and did my research. And the one thing that I found interesting when I was watching was when I watched the behind the scenes stuff and they were talking about casting for the movies because they didn't want carbon copies of the original actors. That was something they actually wanted to stay away from. They wanted an essence, they wanted a feeling, but they didn't want, mimics. They absolutely didn't want mimics. They just wanted people that could, really capture the essence. And I think Zachary Quinto is the quintessential embodiment of what they were trying to do, because there were times where people were saying he looked like Nimoy. He would do something, he'd tilt his head, he'd raise an eyebrow. He really embodied the spirit of Spock. And he and Leonard Nimoy actually became friends because remember, Leonard was in the first one, and then he made a very brief appearance in the second one, a very important appearance in the second one. But Zachary had the chance, obviously, to work with Nimoy and to talk to Nimoy on set and to kind of get that, get the feeling. And Nimoy was very appreciative of being brought back and being able to portray Spock one last time. He mentioned that in the extras that I watched. And as far as the other actors, Zoe Saldana, who did an amazing Uhura, had the chance to sit down with Nichelle Nichols, and Anton Yelchin, which, by the way, every time I watch these movies now, I get sad thinking about his tragic passing. But he was of Russian ancestry. He was fluent in Russian. So his Russian accent was actually a combination of an authentic Russian accent with that little bit of mimicry kind of parodying that Chekhov did, or I'm sorry, that Walter Koenig did originally. So like when he was trying to make the announcement and he was trying to log into the computer and he was trying to give his passcode and it was supposed to be Victor, and it came out Wictor, and the computer's like, what? That was a nod back to TNG. So that was, that was something. And Walter Koenig was on the set and Anton got a chance to meet him. John Cho, who they've cast for Sulu, JJ Abrams actually called or spoke with in some way George Takei, because George Takei was a Japanese American and John is actually Korean, South Korean. So there was a concern of with George and how he would react. Ironically, there's something else I'll talk about in a little bit. But George said, it wasn't about being a Japanese American per se. It was that there was an Asian American represented, that the Asian society was represented. So the fact that they picked John to do this, he fit the character. I think he embodied Sulu quite well, especially in Into Darkness, because we all know that Sulu during the movies always had his eye on that captain's chair. He got it in 6. He was captain of the Excelsior, but you kind of got to see where that started, at least with this version of Sulu. Now let's talk about Simon Pegg. Huge Star Trek fan. Heard a rumor from our friend Chris Abbott that he is actually an Enterprise fan, which I would love to try and get in touch with him and see if that's true. But unfortunately, his Twitter, which is his official Twitter account, is moderated for him. So the chances of me going, Simon, will you please come, is slim to none. Doesn't mean I won't try, but we'll see. And Simon had to do the Scottish accent, and there was actually a Scottish, I think he was he was an assistant director, he was the first AD, he was something. There was a Scotsman on the set who said he nailed that accent spot on. Now, I saved the 2 best for last. Carl Urban. For anybody that watched these movies, you had to admit that man nailed Bones, from that perfect lilt in his voice to the mannerisms, to the damn it Jims, to the eyebrows, to everything else. He really had McCoy down. And again, he was a fan, so he wanted to do justice to something that he loved. Now, Kirk was a little difficult. They were having a problem when they were thinking about casting Kirk, but they found Chris Pine. For a second I blanked on his name. They found Chris, and he actually screen tested with Zachary. Zachary was around the day that they brought Chris in. And again, it was about embodying the character, not mimicking the character. And they said from the get-go that he was not going to do the William Shatner pausing and speaking. That was out. He was going to do Kirk without the Kirk, because it's different. So that's where the casting went in. And like I said, you had TOS people that were really excited for this and put their stamps of approval on it and went to the set and talked to the people. So you have to figure JJ's goal was obviously to do an homage, as whether you agree or disagree with the story and how he decided to do it. His intentions were pure, to bring Star Trek back to the big screen in a big way. And I've talked to people, I know people that hate it. Ryan Husk, who was actually in as background acting and who was a guest on the show, and I tried to get him tonight, but he unfortunately couldn't make it. He's lukewarm on it, which I found was really interesting, because my experience has always been love it, hate it, but he's actually kind of right down the middle. And the one thing that there were problems. I am not saying that there weren't problems. I had a problem with the Spock Uhura relationship. I don't know where that came from, or whose idea was it. It was just a little, it didn't feel very organic. And we all know that when it comes, for me, it really does come down to the organics of it. So, yeah, I wasn't, that part of it wasn't really doing it for me. But Uhura herself, I thought it gave, that's the other thing that this reboot did in 2009 that Gene Roddenberry couldn't do in 1966. Uhura was a badass. I mean, what Gene Roddenberry, I feel, took everything that he could as far up to the wall as he could without getting canceled. Just having that diverse crew on the bridge was as good as he was going to get for the time period. What we could do in 2009 was give Uhura kick-ass fighting skills, definite, just she was always amazing at her job. But now she was also good in a firefight. Things that, again, he couldn't have done necessarily back in 1966. JJ was able to kind of beef up her character, which I thought was amazing. So, but again, with the Spock and Uhura thing. The other thing that I found interesting was because of obviously Nero coming through and changing time, obviously the temporal prime directive, which they actually just mentioned on last night's Voyager, the temporal prime directive was something that came around where nobody from Starfleet didn't believe in interfering with the timelines, and then every other time traveling, everything that we've seen with Star Trek, the timelines weren't interfered with. They were very careful to not. But obviously Nero popping back in completely blew that out of the water, and it was all about screwing up the timeline. And what I liked about this was kind of there's a sense of nature versus nurture. There's a sense of kind of like predestiny, because the timeline was altered. Kirk, instead of having a father raise him and teach him and put him into Starfleet and kind of teach him about the values of Starfleet. That didn't happen. That really didn't happen. Sorry. Like I said, I'm one person and I'm trying to balance doing my streaming and doing YouTube, so forgive me. How to answer a question. So anyway, so Kirk had all of the personality traits. I mean, he still inherited these personality traits from the same parents, but the fact that his dad wasn't around in the Kelvin timeline, he became a rebel. The focus wasn't the same. Kirk was essentially the same person. The rule breaker, the risk taker, and on all of that was there. But instead of having his father around to hone it, he had the voice. Oh yeah, I just found this out today, which I thought was incredible. He had Greg Gutenberg yelling at him for stealing his car. Now, if anybody knows who Greg Gutenberg is, he is an actor, big acting nerd. He has been on Heroes. He played the cop in Heroes, and he loves Star Wars and he loves Star Trek, and he shows up in a bunch of Star Treks. He shows up in Star Wars, and he was also the voice of Kirk's stepfather in 09. He's the one that was yelling at him about taking his convertible out for a joyride. Anyway, but that's the kind of kid he was because he didn't have the father. Yet, again, those personality traits were there, but had he had a father to nurture them in a specific way, he would have turned into the Kirk from the prime timeline, and not the Kirk that Captain Pike found beat up in a bar. Now there's something else. Pike had the Enterprise, but Spock, the whole first officer thing never worked. Spock and Kirk got off to a rocky start. And again, everybody knows how much of a fan I am of prequels. That's why I love Enterprise. And that's also another reason why I like where JJ picked up, because he picked up before TOS. This is how they get together. This is how they gelled as a family and gelled as a crew. So, but you have to imagine that Kirk and Spock probably didn't get off to that rocky start in the prime timeline. But look, predestiny, again, Bones and Kirk, almost an immediate friendship. Kirk as a womanizer, they kind of made a little more of a joke out of it, because every time he passed a pretty woman, hi baby, hi ladies, how are you? They kind of played with that. And that was the other thing that I liked about the Kelvin movies, JJ's movies, that lightness, that humor that kind of infuses throughout the story was there. And I thought it was done well, because there were nods to red shirts. There's nods to Kirk and his being the ladies' man, I guess, is kind of the polite way to put it. The damn it, Jims, the metaphors, in Into Darkness, and he turns around and says, when you knock it off with the metaphors. I mean, the first crewman to die off the Enterprise in 2009 was a red shirt. Go figure. So that I liked. Again, I was literally just talking to a friend of mine before we started doing this, and I'm trying to remember, because she said we both agreed about the Uhura thing. We really didn't like that relationship. Honestly, I didn't like that they blew up Vulcan, only because my favorite episode of TOS is Amok Time, which now obviously can't really happen in the Kelvin universe. Hey, Domestic, you found me. How are you? Domestic just logged in, hanging out with me here on the YouTubes, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I have a ton of notes. One of these days I'm going to show you. You know what? This is what I do for the show. I actually sit down and write out notes, handwrite notes. I'm old school. I like just putting pen to paper for stuff like this. The other thing that was interesting is that Nero kind of altered Starfleet, as you saw in the oh my gosh, Into Darkness. Were it not for Nero, Admiral Marcus probably would not, Starfleet would have gone on in the same kind of way as a peaceful exploratory body that it was. But now all of a sudden Nero comes, Romulan, people have died, and Vulcan got blown up, and some people within Starfleet decided that they needed to be more militant again. And you got Marcus building a warship and literally looking for and finding Khan. And Khan's big speeches about, you're peaceful people. You can't, what do you say to Spock? Something about you can't even lie. How can you be expected to break bone? Robert is messaging me. Robert, if you go to YouTube and look up NX7062, it should take you to my page. I'm sorry if you're not finding it, but I just tested that the other day. So, or actually, I apologize. I tested it earlier today when I was, trying to find a link to send out to everybody. So that, Starfleet in and of itself has been altered, which I found really interesting. And since I've started talking about Into Darkness, Benedict Cumberbatch, a lot of people took issue with his casting, and I can understand that. Khan is not Caucasian. Ricardo Montalban. Okay, thanks, Domestic. I will have to. That's interesting because I tested it and it did earlier. So, but thanks, Domestic. I will totally fix that. Domestic is telling me that my link doesn't work, which is weird. But you know what? You gotta love the internet only when it works. Like when it, wait, okay, hold on. Sidebar. You mean you searched for NX7062 and it didn't work? Okay. Guys, I would love to help with the tech things. Let's try this. Robert, try searching for Stephanie K, because that's what Domestic did. You guys have to forgive me. This really is, don't forget, this is literally my second day, or my second podcast doing this live thing. So thank you so much for bearing with me. It is complete. Oh, you know what? And I think I figured out the problem. All right. Now I know why it didn't work. All right. I know what it did. Okay. Robert, definitely go search for Stephanie K. This is actually, I have 2 channels. That's the problem. I clicked the wrong button. All right. So yeah, the link works if I had pushed the right button. I'm actually on my other channel. That's why. But anyway. Oh, Domestic, you're so sweet. Thank you. I love having you around. It was good seeing you in Chase's Q&A on Saturday. Are you going to the one this Saturday with Connor Trenier and Dominic Keating? Because I've got my ticket for that too. Anyway, back on track. I'm going to go talk about some stuff. Got to get back on track. So I understand why people were upset. Khan is not Caucasian. Ricardo Montalban was not Caucasian. Khan Noonien Sung, not Caucasian. I that aside, and understandably so, I get it, I understand it, I get it. I just really enjoyed his performance. I thought his performance as Khan was pretty damn good. That manic, barely controlled, he's got like the superior intellect, but he's also aggressive and rageful and angry. And, that intellect where it's almost at war with, it's at war. These two sides of him, this intellectual side and this aggressive, warlike side. And I just thought he played that really well, regardless of the fact that a lot of people feel like he was miscast. And I respect that. But look, this is what he was given and this is what he did. And I think he did really, 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 really well with it. And so all in all, like I said, there's a couple little hiccups. They mentioned Nurse Chapel in the first one as being on the Enterprise, but then Carol Marcus alludes to the fact that she left to go to some outer rim, and I know that's a Star Wars term, outer rim territory. Hey, I have to apologize right now to anybody out there that can't find me on Twitter or on YouTube because I hit the wrong freaking button and I'm actually broadcasting on the wrong channel. So I apologize to everybody that is having an issue finding me. So anyway, but this is why I'm going to move it. It's going to get moved and I'll send out apologies on Twitter later. Like I said, this is all a work in progress. So then they mentioned Nurse Chapel as being somewhere way far away because she had a little encounter with Jim and then that sent her off running. So I don't know if that was alluding to the fact that they were together on the Enterprise. It just felt like, it sort of felt like she wasn't on the Enterprise, but I mean, that's just my take. It could just be that he bumped into her on the Enterprise and it sent her running as far afield from him as she possibly could. Let's see what else. Oh, well, we have to absolutely talk about all of the Enterprise references, because the other thing that I love is the fact that this did take place after Enterprise. So everything with Enterprise is canon in both universes, which hence leads to comments like Scotty beaming Admiral Archer's prize Beagle to test his transwarp theory and having it completely disappear off the face of the universe, to an NX in Admiral Marcus's office, to the abundance of references in Star Trek Beyond. They referenced the Xindi conflict. They referenced Mako's. The USS Franklin actually predates the NX-01. But they were talking about, hull plating as opposed to, or polarizing the hull as opposed to shields, which Lieutenant Reed did often. And it's just such a, so it's like if the only thing that they can reference is Enterprise, I don't have a problem with that. I love the fact that, like I said, it just seems like the Kelvin Universe, what the Kelvin Universe has accomplished, is showing that kind of fate has a hand in things. And as Spock said, the reason that he sent Jim back to the Enterprise by himself was because he didn't want to deny Jim the chance to forge that bond with Spock. And regardless of time, regardless of space, regardless of interference with the timeline, Kirk and Spock were meant to be. This crew was meant to be. And I loved that feeling that even if it was different, even though there were conflicts, even though the friendships didn't start the way you would have expected them to, because they're all different people. Spock lost his planet, Kirk lost his father. It doesn't matter. It was all meant to be. And I think that that's a really amazing thing that the movies brought to us. And again, it brought it back. And there is going to be another one after a lot of people not wanting to do it and wanting to do it, and the whole thing with why can't I remember his name? Quentin Tarantino, which I'm not sure how I would have felt about a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek. Really, really not sure. A lot of people are probably thinking, well, he couldn't do worse than JJ. Who knows? I guess we are all bound to find out. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but obviously everything in Hollywood has been put on hold. What else did I like about? Like I said, I liked them. I'm not sure I could say love them. I honestly, my favorite Star Trek movie is First Contact. Just because it's kind of let's sort of where Enterprise sort of picked up. And seeing Deanna get drunk was always funny. I don't have a problem with the Kelvin timeline the way some people do. Obviously Picard now is kind of trying to work its way into talking about the Kelvin timeline, because I mean, technically I guess TNG is now part of the Kelvin timeline. Because I think no matter, and like I said, the Romulans completely screwed the pooch with temporal. I mean, we know this. But again, a lot of stuff just seems like regardless of what happens, things are meant to be. So you have to figure Picard's future and the future, in TNG and all of that is still something that happens at some point in some way. It absolutely happens somehow, some way. It's a thing. So how it happens or what effect it has, I guess we're all going to have to find out. Hold on one second, folks. Let me explain something about this office. Obviously, Podcat is here. Say hi. See, Podcat has joined me. The whole point is that somebody might be saying, why do I keep the office door open and let my animals in? It's because it was either that or you guys could listen to them howl and scratch outside the door, trying to get in. So this is just the lesser of two evils, besides the fact the cat, thanks to Lambda Quadrant and Holocon, has become more famous than I am. So that's Podcat. But domestic, I think you're right. Quentin Tarantino is probably going to be a little bloodier. Hopefully it's tastefully done, although when it comes to Quentin Tarantino, it's more about quantity than quality when it comes to bloodletting. So I don't know. Maybe it's going to be a lot of Klingon stuff and Batlets. Don't know. I guess we're all going to find out when we find out. But back to the whole time travel thing. So, time travel. Yeah. Oh, okay. So, no matter, because I think I think the lesson is no matter how careful you are with the time travel, things are going to happen. For those of you that watch Enterprise, there's an episode of Enterprise called Regeneration, and it's got the Borg in it. And everybody's thinking, well, how do you get the Borg in Enterprise when we didn't encounter them until TNG? Real simple. First contact. You got to figure maybe at some point, somehow, some way, a Borg got left behind. You don't know, but it's entirely possible. But again, the way Enterprise handles the fact that it's a prequel with everything ahead and how you manage that, it's just that they never said who they were. And so whatever log entries that there were from the Enterprise wouldn't necessarily say the Borg. So that's how they kind of answered that question. But so no matter how careful you are with time travel, there's going to be a ripple effect. So Picard, I think, is looking to answer what's going to be going on with that in season 2. Somebody said something about Jonathan Del Arco being slated for season 2, but he kind of put the kibosh on that in Twitter. Somebody said, "Oh, really excited to see you're going to be in season 2." He's like, "No, I'm not." So I guess Hugh really is dead. Or he lied because that shouldn't get leaked yet. I don't know. I guess we're all going to find out when all of this is over and we are all back to our lives, hopefully sometime in the very near future. So anyway, that is my take on Star Trek 2009. I don't have a problem with the Kelvin timeline. I think it was really well cast. I think that they were paying homage to TOS and they did everything that they possibly could to keep in line with TOS. Oh, the one thing that I said I was going to mention, George was good with John Cho's being cast as Sulu. What he was not good with was that in Beyond, they let you know that Sulu is gay. And George's response to that was, gee, guys, that's great. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you have an entire universe to play with. And you could have made anybody gay. Gene Roddenberry wrote Sulu as straight. He had no choice. Sulu is straight. If you want to honor Sulu, you should have left it alone and introduced a new gay character. The other thing that I almost forgot to mention, and what I loved, is at the end of Beyond, there's a scene. Now, in Beyond, they talked about Kirk's birthday. It was very much like 3 when they were talking about his birthday. And at the end when everybody's, getting together to surprise Kirk for his birthday, and he says, "to absent friends," which is something that he said in 3. Again, showing that there's parallels. But I would like to think that was aimed at, and it probably was, because the movie was dedicated to Leonard Nimoy. I'd like to think that specific toast was also aimed at the fact that Leonard had passed away while they were shooting the movie, or because his Spock's death was mentioned in the movie. So, to absent friends, I would like to think in some way was actually a toast to Leonard, as well as part of just the movie. So anyway, that about wraps up my opinions on the Kelvin timeline. It's good. I still enjoyed it. Like I said, there were issues with it, but I mean, no movie's perfect. And when you're rebooting something as revered as Star Trek, people are going to have problems. I would still, and pains me to say because I love Star Wars, I think the reboot of Star Trek was better to Star Trek as a whole, to the Star Trek universe, than the last 3 Star Wars movies. I liked the last 3 Star Wars movies, but I had a lot more problems with the last 3 Star Wars movies as a whole than I did with the 3 Star Trek movies. So and JJ did both of them, go figure. But that's kind of where I'm landing. I think that they, all in all, I think they paid an homage to TOS. And like I said, I think it's great that they were out there, because I really feel like it probably did bring some people into the fold that may not have caught on anytime before those 3 movies came out. In fact, I think I know somebody that said their first introduction to Star Trek was seeing one of those. Pretty sure. But anyway. And so thank you guys for... Thank you guys so much for joining me, Domestic. Thank you for finding me. Robert, I'm sorry you couldn't find me. This will be better on Wednesday because I know what I did wrong here. But you know what? I am a work in progress. This whole video thing is an absolute work in progress. So guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you all on Wednesday night when I will be back on the right channel. Until then, live long and prosper.